Archbishop John Whitgift was one of the most important people ever born in Grimsby. He was a dominant figure in late Tudor England. But he has divided opinion. Was he wise and charitable, or was he bullying and greedy, prepared to send men to be executed because their beliefs were different to his? Let's examine his life story. Welcome to this video about one of Lincolnshire's most controversial historical figures, Archbishop John Whitgift from Grimsby. I'm Adrian Gray, an historian and author, and I'm also a historical advisor to the Pilgrims and Prophets Community History Group. Whitgift is well known to historians of the Tudor period, but seemingly little known in his home county. So let's explore his fascinating story. There used to be a blue plaque in Bethlehem Street, Grimsby, to mark where John Whitgift was born in 1530. He was the oldest son of a merchant. Sadly, the plaque was stolen in 2023. The main evidence of his link with the town is now the John Whitgift Academy, which is named after him, but he does feature in some of the decorations of the town hall. It's little to show for a man who was one of the dominant figures of England under Queen Elizabeth I. With such muted celebration, you might think Grimsby has an ambivalent relationship with its famous son, and you would be right. Whitgift seems to have gone to nearby Wellow Abbey for his early education, but that can only have been brief since it was closed down in the Reformation. In 1536, it was a turbulent year in East Lincolnshire, with a major revolt against Henry VIII and his policy of closing monasteries. Wellow has now been engulfed by the growth of Grimsby, but this 1800s map shows that it was very close to the town as it then was. The abbot of Wellow, who was his uncle, survived the revolt, unlike the abbots of some of the other Lincolnshire abbeys, and he stayed on for a while to teach the pupils. Next, Whitgift was sent to London, perhaps with the support of the old abbot. There he became proficient in Latin, the bedrock of an academic or church career. By 1550, Whitgift was at Pembroke College in Cambridge, where he was immersed in discussions over developing Protestant theology. Then in 1553, Mary became queen, and she dealt with leading Protestants harshly as she established a new Catholic monarchy. Nicholas Ridley, who had been master of Pembroke College, was burnt at the stake. This was one of the most famous executions of the Protestant Reformation. Ridley also had some Lincolnshire connections, and his fellow martyr Hugh Latimer often stayed with Catherine Willoughby, the Duchess of Suffolk, who was based at Grimsthorpe Castle. As someone who sided with the evangelical Protestants, Whitgift was at risk. However, he survived because he had some protection from Andrew Perne, the university vice-chancellor. Later, Whitgift's enemies implied that there was more to the Whitgift-Perne relationship than was decent amongst clergymen. Perne was condemned by others as a turncoat, but his flexibility was useful at such a time. But the rumours about Perne being Whitgift's lover were to dog him for years. When Elizabeth replaced Mary, Whitgift was safe to embark on a career in the church. He made it clear that he was strongly Protestant by his preaching at St Mary's in Cambridge, declaring the Pope to be Antichrist. He gained a new supporter in Richard Cox, Bishop of Ely, who gave him a rich income from the rectory of Teversham. Cox and Whitgift were similar. One biographer has written that they shared a single-minded determination to maximise the income available. Meanwhile, Whitgift also built an academic career, and by 1563 was a professor of divinity at Cambridge. He was still clearly a staunch Protestant, and in 1564 even signed a petition against the surplice. This could have got him into trouble, but within a few months he changed to being in support of the surplice and became a strong advocate of the government policy. This helped him win the confidence of William Cecil, becoming the most powerful man in the kingdom. In 1567, Whitgift became master of Trinity College. an appointment for which he thanked William Cecil, who was by then the dominant politician of the time. By 1565, he was able to purchase a country manor at Clavering in Essex, where he provided a home for his younger brother. This was conveniently between London and Cambridge. Perhaps because of William Cecil's influence, he got a chance to preach before the Queen, who was impressed. It also helped his career that at Cambridge he developed a reputation for dealing sternly with the Puritan rebels who were challenging some aspects of the Elizabethan Church of England. Whitgift built his career on being a champion of the Elizabethan settlement, which set the rules for how churches should be run, including what should be worn by the clergy and the words and prayers they should use. This was all set out in the Book of Common Prayer, which many Puritans came to detest. Puritans also disliked rules about having to wear a white surplice over the black cassock, which they felt was much too Roman Catholic. This later became an issue of discipline in Whitgift's church, by which time he had changed his own mind. The first clergyman to be deprived of his church for not wearing a surplice was Edward Brocklesby, who came from Glentworth in Lincolnshire. But at Cambridge, Whitgift faced an opponent, Thomas Cartwright, a steadfast Puritan. Cartwright supported a more congregational approach to church governance. Whitgift introduced new university statutes to corner Cartwright during the early 1570s. But then other opponents emerged, like Walter Travers and John Field. Soon, Whitgift and Cartwright were exchanging bad-tempered publications, and it is clear Cartwright got under Whitgift's skin. He complained to Cecil that Cartwright had been slanderous, but the power was all on Whitgift's side, and Cartwright went abroad for a time. Cartwright had other supporters like John Field, who helped produce a pamphlet, Admonition to Parliament. This wanted the governance of the Church of England changed, complained about too many vestiges of Catholicism, and ridiculed bishops. The battle lines for 70 years of conflict were being drawn up. Whitgift wrote a response, and then so did his enemy Cartwright. Yet Whitgift had shown his weakness. He was a proud man who could be riled by satire and sarcasm. For the time being, Whitgift got his reward for defending the official church order. In 1577, he was made Bishop of Worcester. The role of bishops was one of the cornerstones of Whitgift's policy and one of the things that annoyed people like Cartwright. Whitgift was already a wealthy man. He had kept a number of church jobs while at Cambridge, including being Dean of Lincoln, and he'd also been Minister of Laceby near Grimsby. And he defended the wealth of the church against those who criticised it. After all, he was benefiting. In Worcester, Whitgift also showed himself as an active follower of the Queen's policies. Here he had less concern about Puritans, but showed himself zealous in chasing down Catholic recusants, who could be seen as traitors due to the Pope's decision to encourage plots against Elizabeth. His powers were extended into Wales, where he was much annoyed by Catholic pilgrimages to St Winifred's Well, which still exists. He felt that one of the best ways to stop this was good preaching by educated men, a policy with which his Puritan enemies actually happened to agree. Whitgift did well at Worcester. He was now one step away from the pinnacle of his career. In 1583, Whitgift was chosen to be the next Archbishop of Canterbury, the senior clergyman in the whole Church of England. He was the personal choice of the Queen, not only because of his staunch defence of her church policies, but because she preferred clergymen who weren't married. Of course, Whitgift's unmarried status also gave his enemies an easy target in making insinuations about his romantic interests. Elizabeth wanted a man who would bring the Puritans to heel and also control the Catholics. He would also act as a balance to William Cecil Lord Burghley, who through his wife at least had some Puritan sympathies. So how would Whitgift make his mark on history in this new role? As a great spiritual leader or a figure of some controversy? Whitgift certainly liked the grandeur of being one of the most important men in England. When he travelled into Kent in 1589, he was attended by over 500 other people, including 100 servants, of whom 50 wore cloth of gold. He encouraged great ceremonies in church, which some thought undermined the English Reformation he was meant to be defending. He started to live at Lambeth Palace in London and also at his country palace near Croydon. Both houses were magnificent enough for him to host Queen Elizabeth there. What were Whitgift's policies? Firstly, he set out to defend the power and wealth of the church. Second, he expanded the influence of the Archbishop of Canterbury across the whole country in terms particularly of controlling local clergy. Thirdly, he set out to reinforce the position of the monarch as head of the church and to enforce obedience to the Elizabethan settlement, which set out how people had to worship. All of these issues made him enemies, who often used ridicule as their main weapon. However, he also has some more welcome policies and shared the Puritans' preference for educated clergy who lived in their parishes. One of the first problems Whitgift had was that a Lincolnshire man, Robert Brown, had been setting up independent religious groups entirely outside the Church of England. At first, these were called Brownists, but later separatists. 2 or 3 of the people who followed such groups were executed in East Anglia. In 1584, Whitgift set out to tame the Puritan ministers within the Church of England. All clergy had to agree or subscribe to 3 articles, but actually this committed them to all of the 39 articles of 1562 and also all the rules contained in the Book of Common Prayer. Whitgift intended to support this by increasing the power of the church legal system to deal with any who refused to subscribe, as it was called. The article that caused the most opposition was about the prayer book, because it contained many rules about things such as wearing a surplice. Such cases were now going to be taken to the Court of High Commission. Whitgift made sure that it was run by people loyal to himself. His policies stirred up Puritan opponents and upset some people in Parliament, while William Cecil, now Lord Burleigh, had his doubts too. Around 400 clergy stood to lose their jobs, and Whitgift upset many moderates as well. Burleigh thought that Whitgift was overly rigid and might provoke trouble. He even compared the use of the 39 Articles to the Spanish Inquisition. But Whitgift had the Queen's support. In the end, the Archbishop accepted a compromise with less severe punishments, but his relationship with the Puritans was perhaps damaged beyond compare. The following year, he replaced his 3 articles with a more tactful set of questions. Whitgift created some long-term problems. He helped to create an opposition of Puritan-minded gentry in the House of Commons, yet he also became increasingly powerful himself, and of course others resented this. This power depended very much on the personal influence of the Queen. In 1584, the House of Commons proved especially challenging. During that year, Whitgift got into a battle with Burleigh and others over who should preach at the Temple Church, with the radical Walter Travers being the issue. In 1586, his power was increased when he joined the Privy Council, making him even more of a politician. The Earl of Leicester, who was also on the Privy Council, sympathised with the Puritans, but he died in 1588. Meanwhile, several MPs were sent to the Tower in 1587 for supporting Walter Travers. Whitgift saw himself as the defender of the state religion, but was exasperated by people who criticised the state of the church. Especially annoying to him was Welshman John Penry, who thought there was too much idolatry and superstition in the church. Penry also complained that the bishops had failed to ensure the gospel was preached in Wales. Whitgift had him arrested and taken to his Court of High Commission. This made Whitgift more unpopular with Puritans, who responded with their best weapon. They began in 1588-9 to satirise and ridicule Whitgift in some anonymous pamphlets which claimed to be written by a Martin Marprelate. Well, Marprelate meant bad bishop. The Marprelate letters started in 1588 and were one of the most entertaining parts of Whitgift's life, but not for him. They lampooned him as Beelzebub of Canterbury, the Pope of Lambeth, and John of Cant. They mentioned his large number of servants, stirred suspicions about his lack of a wife. They said he was the King of Pride and even Lucifer. The sort of large printing press that produced these letters ought to have been easy to find, but the press was supported by Puritan gentry who had the means to move it around and hide it on their estates. They pretended that the pamphlets were printed overseas, which is actually where most Puritan literature came from. Meanwhile, Whitgift employed his own writers to try to get his own back. In 1590, he managed to arrest Elizabeth Crane, who had been born as Elizabeth Hussey at Blankney in Lincolnshire. She was imprisoned for a while and given a huge fine. Whitgift's agents arrested several other people on suspicion of being involved in the Marprelate letters. One of them was the Puritan preacher John Udall, also a great writer, and he died in prison, which caused considerable bitterness. Another was John Penry, who had only recently escaped capture at a separatist meeting. Penry was hung in 1593, having been denied any final access to his wife or his 4 daughters, who all had good Puritan names such as Deliverance, Comfort, Safety and Sure Hope. In 1593, Whitgift went after 2 Puritans who favoured abandoning the Church of England. They were called separatists, Barrow and Greenwood. Barrow called Whitgift the second beast of Revelation. Well, they were executed under a law that had been intended for use against Roman Catholic rebels, but which Whitgift had amended to use against Puritans. Soon after, John Penry was also executed. Whitgift found it harder to trap others. He detested Walter Travers, a friend of his old enemy Cartwright, who was also capable of writing books that annoyed the Archbishop, so he drove him out of London. But Lord Burleigh found him a job in Dublin instead. A steady stream of Puritan churchmen ended up in prison, men like Francis Marbury, who later settled at Alford and was the father of the famous Anne Hutchinson. Whitgift increasingly used the law, such as the Act for Retaining the Queen's Subjects in Due Obedience, and increased the penalty for not attending your parish church. Many Puritans then started to go to the Netherlands, from where they kept up a constant barrage of criticism. Whitgift had one other unusual enemy, the torturer Richard Topcliffe. Topcliffe was also from Lincolnshire, where he seems to have enjoyed legal battles against other local gentry, in between capturing and torturing Catholic priests. In 1591, he captured a young Catholic priest from Little Limber, a village very near to Grimsby, and that has largely disappeared today. The priest later claimed that Topcliffe offered to let him go if he would admit to being Whitgift's illegitimate love child. This was perhaps odd, since the rumours about Whitgift tended not to be about relationships with women. But it was also odd that when Paulmot, was his name, entered England in disguise, he took the assumed name of John Whitgift. The Paulmots were a Saltfleetby and Grimsby family, so Topcliffe may have had some local issues he was interested in. Ironically, one of this family went to the Puritan colony of Massachusetts and became the first master of the Latin school in Boston over there. Anyway, the priest, Thomas Pulmet, refused Topcliffe's request and was executed in 1592. After his martyrdom, Pulmet was beatified by the Roman Catholic Church, but not until 1987. It has been suggested that he used the alias Whitgift as the Archbishop was actually his godfather, and he had studied at Trinity College when Whitgift was its master. But nonetheless, it was a very dangerous joke to have made. Topcliffe, who hated Whitgift, was clearly suspicious that the godson had a closer relationship, and also tried to get Pulmet to say that Whitgift had paid for his Catholic studies abroad. Pulmet denied all this, but he did claim that Topcliffe had boasted of having sexual favours from none other than Queen Elizabeth. Whitgift's great supporter, the Queen, died in 1603, and he was said to have been at her bedside to the very end. He was in a poor condition himself by this time. He relied increasingly on the hardline Richard Bancroft, who was Bishop of London. Under James I, he did attend the Hampton Court Conference, which was a resounding defeat for the Puritans, who had hoped for more reforms from the new king. Whitgift himself died soon after at Lambeth Palace a few weeks later in 1604. Early historians like John Strype, shown here, tended to be quite favourable to Whitgift, especially as he was soon followed by Archbishop Laud, who was a total disaster. Whitgift was seen as quite moderate by the standards of the time, trying to keep a balance with both Puritans and Catholics. The historian Rouse saw him as a selfless servant of the state, but it's perhaps difficult to see a man who gained such wealth as entirely selfless. The Victorian Thomas Macaulay was more sceptical, as shown here, and Patrick Collinson, another noted historian of Puritanism, dismissed Whitgift as very limited, intolerant and rigid. He's a man who continues to cause division. Well, in conclusion, it's easy to criticise Whitgift using the values of our own age. However, I feel that Whitgift actually failed to achieve his aim of a single unified national church, as he failed to understand that the practice of religion was changing in his own day. The Church of England was never able to include everybody within its ranks, and subsequent history has shown that it has often been divided by competing attitudes and beliefs. So his idea of a national church was probably not going to get off the ground. Lacking foresight, Whitgift's great project was probably doomed to fail, eventually at least. The most likely reason why Grimsby showed so little interest in its famous son was because it was a town strongly influenced by Puritanism. Its MPs included some of the most notable men from Lincolnshire Puritan families, like Sir William Ray and his son Sir Christopher Ray, from a family that in 1641 denounced bishops and fought for Parliament against the king. However, the town's mayor in the years leading up to the Civil War was Gervase Hollis, who supported king and church, and he later became one of the MPs. So even this argument is not entirely convincing. Yet we also have the issue that Whitgift, despite his great wealth, chose not to endow Grimsby with any of it. He created foundations for Lambeth and Croydon, but not for his hometown. He rather turned his back on it. So there we must leave Whitgift, a man once of great fame, but now largely overlooked, whose achievements perhaps seem rather unimpressive to those alive today, although at the time he had been a colossus striding the nation. And in case you think I have forgotten, Whitgift School in Grimsby has nothing to do with the Whitgift Private School in Croydon, which would now cost a great deal to attend. In Grimsby, the council chose the name of Whitgift for their new school in 1969. None of Whitgift's money was involved. You can find out much more about Whitgift and other great figures from Lincolnshire history in our books, especially Restless Souls Pilgrim Routes. Order from your library or bookshop or from the Bookworm Retford website.